God almighty, I'm losing my marbles. Thank you. All right, thank you. And again, if those of you who are here, if you have not signed in, please do us a favor and go to the front door and make sure that you sign in so we've got a record of your attendance. We will first hear the reading of a staff report for each case that is being brought before us today. For those of you in the audience and those watching on television, this is the first hearing of any rezoning, text change, or special exception request. Every once in a while, we do have a zoning request or a text amendment that does come before us, gets tabled, has to come back. So that may be one of the ones that we have on the agenda. Once the staff report has been read by the planning staff, the applicant will have an opportunity to come forward, give us a brief overview. And then we'll have an opportunity for anyone in the audience to speak for or against the request or to inquire about the said request. And let me make a comment about speaking and coming forward. If when I call for anyone who's in favor of an ordinance or a change or anyone who's against it, if there are multiple parties in the audience who want to come forward, the first thing I'm going to ask is if there is a designated spokesperson for the group, the cause, whatever the case might be. If there is not, I am literally going to go in the order in which I see you, and after the first person speaks, anyone who comes after that has to bring another topic or something else to us that we haven't already heard. If you're just coming forward to agree, that's not what this is designated for. So after the first person speaks, I'll probably say something like, anyone in the audience who agrees with this, raise your hand, we'll have a count, whatever. But I'm not going to ask everybody to come forward and say the same thing over and over and over again. Then we give anyone, so we give anyone in the audience to speak for or against. Then the commissioners will have an opportunity to ask any questions, to have any further discussion. And then we'll ask for a motion. And once the motion is made and is seconded by the commission, a vote will take place and a recommendation will be rendered. The case will go back to the planning department for their independent recommendation, and then if it's a favorable recommendation, then the case moves forward to city council with 2 independent recommendations. If the planning department makes a recommendation for denial or the commission makes a recommendation for denial, the applicant will have 10 days from the letter stating denial to notify the clerk of council that they are requesting to be placed on the city's agenda. The City Council of Columbus will hold a public meeting. It's called the first reading. And then the council will consider the case. They'll review PAC and planning department recommendations. They'll hear any discussion on the matter. Very similar to what takes place here. The council will then make a final decision at what is called a second reading or a second public meeting. And so that's sort of how the gist of how all of that works. Commissioners, we don't have any minutes to bring forward. This go around, we're going to catch up on the minutes at our next meeting. So we're going to jump right into our cases, and I need to look at something because we're shifting the order on a couple of things here. Let me just take a real quick look at something. Okay, so the very first case we're going to hear is REZN-12-18-2203. And this is a request to rezone 0.34 acres of land located at 3707 2nd Avenue. The current zoning is GC, which is general commercial, and the proposed zoning is RO, which is residential office. The proposed use is warehousing, residential apartments, and office. Justin Krieg is the applicant, and this property is located in Council District 8. Mr. Renfro, if you've got the staff report for us.
Yes, ma'am. General land use is consistent. Planning area F. Current land use designation is general commercial. Future is mixed use. It is compatible with the existing land uses. The environmental impacts. The property does not lie within the floodway and floodplain area. The developer will need an improved drainage plan. Excuse me. Prior to the issuance of a site development permit, if a permit is required, property is serviced by all city services. Average annual daily trips will increase by 141 trips. If used for office, the level of service will remain a level of C. The site shall meet the codes and regulations of the Columbus Consolidated Government for commercial usage. There will be no school impact, no buffer requirements, no response from Fort Benning, no DRI recommendation. 60 property owners within 300 feet of the subject's property were notified of the rezoning request. The planning department received 1 call and/or email regarding the rezoning, and they were in opposition for it. No additional information.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions regarding the staff report? Mr. Kenner, you just have to make sure your mic's on.
Just I have a technical question concerning the traffic count. The staff report said it will increase by 141 trips. It seems to me that the proposed zoning traffic is 141, so the traffic actually goes down from 160 to 141. It's just a small technical point, but if it's going to be on the record, let's just be right about it. Okay?
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions regarding Mr. Dudley?
I have a question about the parking spaces. The applicant is asking for the required number to be set at 27. Now, is it correct that the required number would normally be 37 for a lot of that size? And if so, does staff have any comment on the request
That's
for a
correct,
lower
and
number?
we could either put conditions, y'all could put conditions on that, or he could go and before BZA and ask for a variance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, Commissioners, regarding the staff report? Good question. All right, if the applicant will please come forward, and if you will state your name and address and give us a brief overview. I don't think we've got his mic on. Is there a little button by it? There you go. Thanks.
My name is Bill Green. I live at 1631 Hilton Avenue. I'm here representing Justin because he is actually hosting a group on the planning of the City Village site this morning. So I'm working with Justin on this project. I have retired from W.C. Bradley as a vice president of construction and have about 20 years of experience in this type of urban planning. Justin is asking that you change, you allow him to make these changes to the zoning because Bibb City, this piece of property is in what used to be the downtown of Bibb City. And this use that Justin is proposing, residential on the first floor, limited residential on the first floor, and a variance to the parking, suits an urban center much better than the present zoning. Justin bought these 3 buildings and this piece of property, hoping that his investment will help revitalize this area of the Bibb City Uptown or Bibb City Downtown. As an urban developer and working with urban planners, I've learned that you have to have 24/7 activity in an urban environment in order to revitalize it. Putting 2 apartments on the ground floor allows him to use the front portion of the one building as office space. What we have found in the uptown area is the depth of the retail areas, the ground floor areas, in most of the old buildings is much more than a present commercial user needs. So he's asked if he can put 2 units in the back one half of this one building. The uses he's got are retail in one building, office in the front of the second building, apartments in the back, and apartments on the second floor of the 2-story building. He's asked for a reduction in parking spaces, which is also very typical of an urban environment. Actually, in uptown Columbus, I believe I'm correct, a certain district of uptown Columbus, there is 0 parking requirement for this type of development. The market determines whether you need parking or not zoning. And putting parking requirements in this type of environment tends to mean you take down old buildings because you need parking, and you're not allowed to do the preservation in the most modern, using the most modern planning methods. So Justin's asking for this so that he can invest in the area and help revitalize the area. And I think it's a very, very suitable plan as someone who has learned and worked in this area for several years.
Thank you.
Is that
Yeah,
Sufficient?
hang tight in case anybody has any questions. Commissioners, are there any questions for Mr. Green? Mr. Dudley?
Just following up on the parking, it seems like Second Avenue is a very busy street already, and if you've got, and even the 27 spaces are split among a couple of different areas. So are you not concerned that you would have people looking for parking on Second Avenue with a lot of traffic whizzing by on both sides?
The market will determine whether he's made the right decision or not on that. Justin and we all, the more you can encourage people to walk a block or two in this type of environment, certainly the better the development of the urban area is. Uptown Columbus is a very good example of several years ago, our citizens did not want to walk 2 blocks to get to a restaurant. That Uptown Columbus is thriving today. There are areas to park out at the edges that people will learn to use and walk that block. If it's a good restaurant or if they've got the right lawyer in the office, they'll certainly learn to walk the block or two. And zoning or code requirements that force clearing of land tend to work against you. Now we're walking past parking lots instead of buildings that are occupied that have some interest to the walker. I believe that urban planners say as long as there's something for someone to look at while they're walking, a storefront, a streetscape, something that's not an empty lot, people will learn to walk, and it's true in all urban areas. And I really would encourage everyone to think of this part of Bibb City as an urban area, not a suburban area, which is really what a lot of our parking requirements have been written about, suburban planning. So this is kind of a hybrid area right now, but I really do, the hope is that it will blossom into one of the little villages that surround a lot of cities like Birmingham or other areas where you have real neighborhood pockets that surround the main uptown.
I'm sympathetic to what you're trying to do, but I've got to say that in following your analogy, you don't have anything like Second Avenue going right down the middle of uptown. So I'd just be concerned if you've got a lot of pedestrians trying to cross the street to park on one side and get over there.
The speed of traffic on Second Avenue is a concern for the development of this area. But that is a concern for the developer and the planners of this area, excuse me. And we actually, in Uptown, traffic has been, it's a 20-year process, but traffic has had to be slowed down to make it a more pedestrian-friendly area. So the long-term solution, I believe, I'm not a traffic expert, but the long-term solution is slow down the traffic on Second Avenue to help this area. Anytime you have throughways through neighborhoods, that's a problem. And I don't believe it's solved by putting a lot of parking lots around that throughway.
Any other questions, commissioners, for the applicant?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Mr.
Yes, sir. Do you have any idea how many units you want to place in this?
Yes, there's
facility?
6 units on the drawings. I don't know which sheet it is. I can find it, although they're not numbered. Will Barnes, Barnes and Associates Architects, has done some preliminary planning. I believe I saw it in the package, but there are 3 buildings on the site. One is a warehouse that is behind what used to be the fabric store, I believe. But in the 2-story building, he has 2 units planned on the bottom floor and 4 units up on the second floor. The 2 units would be in the back of the 2-story building, and the front of the 2-story building would be I thought I had it here, I'm sorry, would be office.
So I travel through there quite often, and if I recall, the speed limit is about 35 miles per hour, and there are a few other businesses there that seem to be doing okay with a volume of traffic that comes through there.
Right.
I guess my question is more of the upgrade of the face of the facility. Are there plans to do the upgrade so that it tries to blend in with what's currently through that area?
What he would like to do is, there is metal cladding, siding on the front of the building. He hopes that he can remove the metal siding, restore the historic fronts of the buildings using historic tax credits, which have stringent requirements, the historic tax credit program, that he would actually restore the building to more of its original state. You know, and to your comment about there seem to be some businesses in the area that are doing okay. Yes, they are doing okay. I wouldn't say they were thriving. The idea of part of Justin's actual comment to me when we started, when he asked me to help him, he said, I want to put my money where my mouth is. I've been trying to get others to invest in this area. I need to invest in this area as well to lead the way. And if we can slow the traffic down a little bit, get some variances on some of the requirements that are healthy variances, and do more planning for the area, I believe you'll see these buildings not doing okay, but starting to thrive.
Yeah, it may be pretty obvious. I go quite often to the cake place over there on 2nd Avenue. I want to blame it on my daughter, but it's more for me. But thank you for answering my question, sir.
Okay.
Commissioners, are there any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Dudley.
This is actually for staff, but it follows up on something the applicant said. My copy of the zoning handbook says that for residential office, residential uses are to be located above the ground floor. And I understand the applicant is planning to have apartments, 2 apartments on the ground floor. I don't see any problem with that, but if we want to consider a motion to do what the applicant wants us to do we need to have something in there to waive the ground floor requirement?
Yes, sir, there would be need, there would be a need for that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, commissioners? All right, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak against this request? And I do not see anyone. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to come forward and speak in favor of it? All right.
Madam Chair, I have a follow-up question
Sure.
for staff, considering what the commissioner here just put on the table. So if we move forward with approval, do we need to incorporate an exception into the initial motion?
Yes, you would.
Okay. Well, Madam Chair, with that said, in regards to matter REZN 1218-2203, which is 0.34 acres located at 3707 2nd Avenue, considering that everything is in compliance per the recommendation of the staff, including the exception of allowing residential locations on the first floor, I move that we approve.
All right, do I have a second? All right, I have a second. All of those in favor, please.
Do we also need to make the parking waiver? Did you say the parking waiver?
Do you want? No.
You can.
If you,
I'd like to, or if,
Yeah, I'll
You wanna
amend my motion to
Okay.
add the parking waiver as well.
all right, so we're going to add, we're going to have the two exceptions for the parking waiver. So do I hear a second with the amended version? All right. All of those in favor, please raise your right hand. And all those opposed? All right. It will go forward as a recommendation for approval. Thank you very much.
look at me.
All right, so that brings us to our next case, which is REZN-12-18-2247. This is a request to rezone 1.5 acres of land located at 1429 Morris Road. The current zoning is SFR2, which is Single Family Residential 2. The proposed zoning is GC, General Commercial. The proposed use is business retail. Martin Flournoy is the applicant, and this property is located in Council District 1, Barns, and the applicant has come forward, so if you'll state your, oh, nope, we
Staff
gotta do the
report.
staff report.
Yes, ma'am. General land use is inconsistent. Planning area E, current land use designation is parks, recreation, conservation. Future is park, recreation, conservation. It is compatible with existing land usage. The property does not lie within the floodway and floodplain area. The developer will need an approved drainage plan prior to the issuance of a site development permit if a permit is required. Property is served by all city services. Average annual daily trips will increase by 191 trips. The level of service will remain B. The site shall meet the codes and regulations of the Columbus Consolidated Government for commercial usage. There will be no school impact. The buffer requirements, the site shall include a Category C buffer along all property lines bordered by the SFR 3 zoning district. The three options under Category C are 20 feet with a certain amount of canopy trees, understory trees, shrubs, ornamental grasses per 100 linear feet, 10 feet with a certain amount of shrubs, ornamental grasses per 100 linear feet, and a wood fence or masonry wall, 300 feet undisturbed natural buffer. No recommendation from Fort Benning or DRI recommendation. 25 property owners within 300 feet of the subject property were notified of the rezoning quest. The planning department received one phone call or email regarding it, approving it. No additional information.
Commissioners, any questions regarding the staff report? All right, if you'll please state your name and address and give us a brief overview.
My name is Martin Flournoy, and on behalf of the Boys and Girls Club, I'm one of the board members, our executive directors here, and my address is 2520 Winton Road, and as John so aptly described, this is the Boys and Girls Club, East Columbus. We are in the process and have under contract the Edgewood Elementary School, approximately probably a quarter mile to the north. The club's intention is to move our whole operation up there because we have so much demand. This particular club we've outgrown, and because it's zoned single family, it's going to be almost impossible to find anybody that's going to qualify to occupy that as a single family. So we're requesting that we rezone that to a commercial use, which we feel like is going to be more conducive to the neighborhood. And anyway, if y'all have any questions, we...
All right, Commissioners, are there any questions for the applicant? Mr. Kenner.
Sure.
It's currently SFR2, and it's, near the park conservation, the playground and so forth down there. It seems like a big stretch to go to general commercial. Have you considered neighborhood commercial or residential office or something in between that's not quite as severe? I mean, the traffic analysis here was for an auto parts store.
Ed, have you seen the building where it's located?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's in an industrial area, the Mary Acres Industrial Park there. What we anticipate, quite honestly, is that we're going to probably end up with another business that's already located there, probably expanding because of the size of the building, the gymnasium, and all the classrooms. Right now, we're target marketing churches because we feel like that might suit their need, but it's a fairly difficult building to market, and to have any lesser zoning than general commercial, I think is a mistake because it would end up sitting there vacant. We'd be here trying to rezone it another time to allow the users that are there to occupy it. But I understand your concern, and I think everybody on the Boys and Girls Club is very conscientious about making sure we get the right user in there, and not some record company or something, but the nature of the business is going to dictate that it's going to be somebody that needs space. And the church use is quite honestly what we anticipate. We've already gotten phone calls from prospective churches and feel like with the ball fields nearby, that'll be the highest and best use. But we need to have the flexibility to be able to accommodate the people who are already over there that have businesses. But
Any other questions, Commissioners, for the applicant? All right, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this request? If so, please come forward. I see no one. Oh, I do have someone who would like to speak in favor. If you'll just come to the mic and state your name and address.
Sure. My name's Rodney Close, President and CEO for Boys and Girls Clubs, and just want to echo Marty's comments and just our youth. We've been in that community for about since 1950s, and we serve about over 200 kids a day, at that location, and have outgrown it. About 100 boys and girls that are on a waiting list because of the need to relocate up the road to Edgewood. And just want to thank Marty and thank you for your consideration of this opportunity, not only to serve 6 through 12 years in that community, but also to go back to serve 13 through 18 with the move. So thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Rodney, before you leave, I just want to take this opportunity to say
Yeah.
thank you to you and your board for what
Yeah.
you guys do with the Boys and Girls Clubs. It's such a critical
It is.
venue
It
to
is.
that part of town, and I know a lot of parents whose kids are allowed to go to that facility, and I'm looking forward to the expansion to Edgewood, because you will be able to do a lot more there and serve more kids, and that's exactly what we need in our community today. More
Yeah.
kids involved learning so that they're not on the streets doing things that they shouldn't be
Yeah.
doing. So I'm certainly in support of what the Boys and Girls Clubs are trying to do, because you guys have a track record of great success. And I
Yeah.
just want to thank you since you was here and took time out to come this morning.
And I second that, too. It's such a good, structured, healthy environment. It is a mission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions or discussion? All right, so then, do I have anyone in the audience who would like to speak against this request? And there is no one. Do I hear a motion? Mr. King?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion regarding case number REZN 12-18-2247 that we approve this case. This is an unusual situation, but we're going to take a look at taking it from SFR2 to GC. It is compatible with existing land uses, and it meets all the other city services requirements.
Do I have a second to this motion? All right, all of those in favor, please raise your right hand. And it is unanimous, so this will go forward with a recommendation for approval, and thank you again. All right, that brings us to, let me look at the order that I'm doing this in here. Okay, I want to bring, I'm going to skip around a little bit. I want to, pardon? Yeah. The special exception, let's see, hang on a minute. No, I have
We
to
have
do
to do
the,
the
I have to
text
do the zoning first, yeah.
You're going to skip.
Hang on, you've got my order in here. You've changed my order. So we're doing the REZN 12-18-2248 next, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, so the next case we're going to hear is REZN-12-18-2248, which is a request for a text amendment to amend the text of the Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, in regards to Table 3.1.1, Community Facilities. Mr. Renfro.
Yes, ma'am. Request to amend the text of the UDO in regards to Table 3.1.1 Community Facilities to read as follows. Amend by permitting community facilities with a special exception in the following districts. The special exception would go into the historic residential estate 10, 5, and 1, SFR 1, SFR 2, 3, and 4, residential multifamily 1 and 2, and then it would be a permitted use in the Uptown District, the CRD, neighborhood commercial, residential office, and general commercial.
All right, Commissioners, are there any questions regarding the staff report on the text amendment? Mr. Kenner.
Yes, Mr. Renfro, could you describe the relationship of this text amendment to Edgewood School, please? And then could you also give a definition of what a community facility is?
The relationship to this text amendment to the Edgewood School is one of the reasons is a lot of the Boys and Girls Clubs throughout Columbus and Muskogee County are not necessarily zoned in the correct zoning classification. But a lot of times the Boys and Girls Club are needed to be zoned in family residential areas, and that's the case for Edgewood Elementary School. We wouldn't want to go in and rezone that to general commercial or anything like that. So this text amendment allows that to kind of encompass all of those in one text amendment.
Could you please describe?
You got to get your mic, we got to get your mic on.
Yeah, could you please describe what a community facility is so that everybody knows, please?
Okay. The definition for community facilities means public or private facilities such as assembly halls, union halls, conference halls, and centers, stadiums, or arenas, auditoriums, including accessory office or an administrative space, nonprofit clubs and lodges, art galleries, museums, libraries, and theaters for live performances or films, videos, or other electronic medium, golf courses and clubhouses, excluding miniature golf and public uses.
Any other questions regarding Mr. Dudley?
Yes, just a comment on that definition. That seems to be very broad, and it seems to overlap with a lot of existing definitions. There's a separate one for golf course, club or lodge nonprofit, that each have their own list of permitted and SEU, special exception uses. So I'm not sure that I see the benefit of combining all these into one. Rather than just saying, well, the Edgewood roadside is SFR2, let's amend club or lodge, not-for-profit, for example, if that's the most applicable one, so that it can be an SEU and SFR2, rather than making it possible, for example, to have an SEU for the historic district for a golf course, which doesn't seem to make sense.
Right, and some of these, like you said, do overlap. So if there are some on here that you would like to amend to be removed from community facilities,
can do
it
that.
be.
Hang on a minute.
And if you wanted to amend club and lodge, you could do that as well.
Is there an existing
Definition?
definition under civic and public under which the boys club would fit, boys and girls club would fit?
That's the problem, is there's not. And right now, that they're zoned in areas, their zoning classifications vary greatly because there's not a set definition that they fall under. And they're a primary residential use.
Yeah, I fully support trying to repurpose Edgewood School for the intended use for the Boys and Girls Club. That's terrific, and I hope we can do it. But I'm concerned about how this is currently presented. Maybe we can modify this in some way, but you know, it affects the historic district, essentially all residential zones in the city, with the exception of residences maybe in the riverfront, the uptown, and maybe residential office. So there's maybe 80 or 90% of the residences in the city that would be affected by this text amendment. Okay, and you know, there are a variety of uses. So you know, if you ended up with if this was passed and then there are subsequent special exceptions, you could have a variety of things happen which are unintended consequences, which I don't think we really would want to have happen. You might end up with soccer areas in the historic district. You might have hockey arenas in single-family residence areas, basketball arenas in residential multifamily. So I think it's too comprehensive. So if it just doesn't seem to me to be the best way to do this. If we could rezone the Edgewood property, or if this text amendment could be modified in some way to make it less onerous. I'm just afraid it's going to open up a Pandora's box in the future of unintended consequences that we can't anticipate today.
And your words of wisdom would be what on that?
Well, quick question for you, John. We're sitting here looking at the club or lodge membership. Why wouldn't it fit under non-for-profit? Why wouldn't it not fit in that part?
Mr. Johnson.
Good morning. The reason we didn't go that route, and we possibly could have, is club or lodge, non-for-profit means a building or facility operated on a nonprofit basis for cultural, fraternal, recreational, religious, and social purposes. And it really didn't meet the definition for what the boys' club does. Now, we could throw in
Recreational.
something there that says
Recreational.
educate, well, but it's so much more. Recreational is almost an accessory to what they're doing.
We can't add and/or?
We could, well, no,
So
what
that
I'm
it's not
saying
a
is,
collective list?
we
it's
could
a-
add something into that
Yeah.
definition as far as educational and some of the other things they program that maybe stretches that definition out a little bit and puts them into that category, then readdress the table as
Yeah.
it relates to club or lodge, not-for-profit.
I think,
Yeah, the lawyer union is speaking now.
Yeah.
But if you do and/or, it allows them to fall under that category and doesn't harm the people that are already within that exception, and it protects the broadness that has been determined here with the.
But I would want to see something like the word educational placed in there,
Okay.
and/or.
and/or
Okay.
recreational and/or
Okay,
educational.
yeah, I can live with that.
And then,
I agree.
under your table,
Can we do that today, or will that have to come back?
it's not, it's a text amendment, so you could amend it here
So
at
we
the
can amend
table
it, okay.
without it going back. And club or lodge is not allowed till it gets to the commercial districts. So you back to a similar situation where you're looking at special exceptions in table 3.1.1 in residential areas.
Okay,
So in essence, what we've applied here, instead of saying in the table, community facilities, we would use the phrase, community, club or lodge, not-for-profit.
Right, which is already here. So you're looking at adding, if you so wish, adding special exception use allowances for these types of uses in residential areas.
okay, so when, I would say this, when the motion is made, Mr. Johnson, if you'll listen to the language before we get a second and make sure that we've worded it, I think, with the intentions of what the commission has, because I want to make sure we do this correctly.
And is it the commission's intention to put in SEUs for each of the areas where there are boys' clubs?
That's for
We've got
your
a list of
discussion.
those.
Yeah, that's a discussion to have up here.
Is that what they're requesting?
It's essentially the exact same thing. Most even though the zoning, all the Boys and Girls Club, Girls Inc. in Columbus, other places like that, most of them are located in bad zoning areas.
Right.
But they're in the middle of neighborhoods
Yeah.
that are single-family. So the uses around them are single-family. The zoning is multifamily, commercial.
Commercial,
The one on
industrial.
Casita Road is industrial. It's
Right,
the only
industrial.
industrially zoned piece of
Yeah.
property in the whole area.
I mean, the nature of the business, they need to be in residential areas.
They need,
Right.
they're serving the immediate
We don't want them on the
community.
strip mall.
That's
you
right.
know?
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
okay.
So,
I think Mr. Bollinger's got to,
I am totally for Boys Club and Girls Club. That, my concern here is that now we are going back and we're making all of these changes to this, and I would rather us go back and revisit and properly document the special exception that we're asking to do here. I get we want to do the broad brush to cover all the Boys and Girls Clubs. What we're doing, though, I'm afraid, is we're opening up the entire city to this special exception because it goes across all the table. So I would rather us go back and consider rewriting this and coming back, and I hate to delay you because I really am in favor of what you're doing. I'm just afraid of the broad brush that we're painting across the city with this.
I fully support that. I think we have to deal with the Boys and Girls Club, but we have to do this right and not make a mistake in the process that we'll be mad about 5 or 10 years from now or whenever, okay?
Well, as far as a rezoning standpoint goes with general commercial, which is what this would be allowed in, for this particular location that Mr. Flournoy is pursuing, would be spot zoning. And then we end up with another vacant school here in Columbus that's going to fall in upon itself. So that's why we proceeded with the special exception, is it does give us some protections, parking, impact on the neighborhood, things of that nature, as far as placing it in there.
So I get, to move the discussion forward with the concerns that are on the table, What are the options here? I mean, I hate for us to leave this discussion with plans of fixing it, and we don't know where they're headed as a commission. So let's try to figure out where we want to go with this to accommodate all the concerns that have been placed on the table. Is a variance for the particular locations, is that an option?
That's not an option.
That's not an option, okay. So we would have to do some form of special.
It would either have to be rezoned or change the text of the ordinance.
Which it sounds as though changing the text of the ordinance is the more favorable.
And that's the preferred recommendation from your staff, from the
Yes,
city
that,
employees?
I mean, that intersection right there is a neighborhood-style commercial intersection, and we would not want to introduce 12 acres of general commercial to
Right.
that.
Well, not that
Wait.
particular area, but the concerns that have been placed on the table in regards to opening up the city to special exceptions within neighborhoods. Are you concerned about that, or do you see that as manageable?
I mean, that's what the special
That's-
exception does. It creates a level of management that has to come here
Per case.
per case.
Okay, so someone wouldn't be able to automatically just go
No.
do something, they would
No.
have to come before the
No.
commission? Okay, so that's a safeguard, if we
That is
take-
the safe, special
that's the
exception is the
safeguard.
safeguard.
All right.
Commissioner, are you okay with that answer?
My preference would be to properly detail this rather than us try to figure out how to verbally state this exception. That's my concern, and I'm totally for what the Boys and Girls Club is doing, and I want to support that. My concern is similar to the other commissioner that, you know, when all of these faces change in the next 5 to 10 years, that by adding this in, we don't know what we're opening up. So I just have a concern. I'd rather this be properly reworded and presented.
Can we ask staff to come back at our next meeting with a
Written text
an
amendment.
addition to the civic and public section that's a specific category for institutions like the Boys and Girls Club, that's not nearly as broad as the community facility one?
What we would-
And proposed with SEUs for the
Yes.
locations where there are, or the categories where there are Boys and Girls Clubs now, including the
Mr.
Morris-
Dudley, what this is going to do is it's going to open it up so that this is allowed. Now, when we get to his special exception,
Right.
that's when we'll decide and can limit what goes on that property. But this is not opening it up, saying, okay, all this can go on in any area, because each area that has a special exception will come before us, and it will go through planning, as it always has. And-
Right, I understand how the special exceptions work, but the...
But the UDO was written, you know, back when it was written, and basically, they've defined the community facilities. Now, if we choose not to place a community, or have a certain exception in here, we can take it out. So when we go to his special exception case, we can limit it. We can limit it to what he's using there. Now, if you came in and you live in the historic district and you wanted to come in and do the same thing, we would limit you as well and hear the case individually. This just gives us an opportunity to allow it to be there. However, it's not a law that it can be there, because it will have to come before every one of us, including council, before it's approved.
I understand that, but the definition of community facilities is so broad that I think it includes a lot of things that we don't even want to open the possibility of SCUs for in every district that's mentioned there.
Right, but I
and so
mean, what I'm saying is we can limit it in the special exception. We can say it's only going to be the administrative space, nonprofit clubs, possibly even leave off lodges if we wanted to on this particular case, but we would have to hear every case. There's not a broad brush stroke for each case, basically. You just have these that are allowed. And again, it's up to us to understand what's going on there and assign it appropriately through the special exception.
I want to let Mr. Brannon, Commissioner Brannon.
I mean, I don't know that I need, if we're going to just amend what they've proposed, which was community facility, to use club or lodge nonprofit, I mean, that's pretty plain language, not requiring a lot of amendments. I would be in favor of moving forward with that today, because we know what that is, and that fits their definition of what the Boys and Girls Club are doing. I don't see why we'd need to wait another month or kick them out another month if we could agree or pass that the proposed change would be
To the
all of those,
definition.
all those special exceptions and in a place where they define or said community facility, we use Clever Lodge nonprofit. And I would be willing to move forward with that today so they can get forward with that.
And we would want to amend the definition per Mr. Reese
Right.
to add educational and the term and/or instead of just or. So that's what we would come back with if it was tabled. It's what you just suggested.
So are you making a motion to that?
So we have two options here. We table it and let the planning department
Yeah.
rework it, reword it, put it on paper and bring it back to us.
Well,
Or,
I mean, I'd like to make a motion.
I would say, or you make a.
Appropriate.
Yeah, I would say, or you're making a motion to make the change with the new verbiage and then moving forward that way.
Well, Madam Chair, the planning department is telling us what they would come back with, so.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying, that those are your two options, basically. You make a motion now with the new
I'm willing to
verbiage.
entertain it to deal with it today.
Right.
I'm-
I'm sorry, I missed.
Yeah.
I didn't hear you.
I said if the motion is made by a commissioner or myself, I'm willing to entertain it to move forward today
So I
because they've
think,
given us their recommendation.
hang on a second. I think before any motion is made, somebody needs to speak verbally about how you're going to word the motion. I would rather hear one of you guys actually put it in a verbal paragraph, somebody, let's hear it before we make the motion.
In what I would propose in the case of REZN 12-18-2248 is to amend the UDO, specifically Table 3.1.1, such that club or lodge nonprofit is made for a special exception in the zoning areas presented by the planning department, and that the definition of club or lodge nonprofit, we add the word educational, and then at the end, and/or, change the or to and/or.
So that would be the verbiage that would be used, and I'm speaking to commissioners, that would be the verbiage that would be used should a motion be brought forward. Do any of you have a question regarding that verbiage? Mr. Dudley?
Yes, just to be clear, are we saying allow SCUs for each of the categories, SFR2, which is the Morris Road facility, RMF2, or rather Edgewood School, RMF2, RO, LMI, GC, and RMF1, which is where the Boys and Girls Clubs locations are?
The zones that they presented in the original table that said community facilities, change that word to club or lodge not-for-profit, which would be special exceptions for all those zones.
I'll point out that that's broader than just where Boys and Girls Clubs are. Among other things, it includes historic district.
While he's on the mic, please.
That's a broader list than just a list of where the Boys and Girls Clubs are, because I know it includes historic district, and it may include some others.
But then we go back to, then we got to figure out where all the Boys and Girls Clubs are. I mean, I
But
think
we
a
have that
special
list.
exception is the protection.
We have that list. That list was
So-
provided.
So then, if you want to amend it, I'd go with the broader one because that's I believe broader is better, but.
Can we just get clarity on that from the staff? Why did you have such a broad list rather than where the Boys and Girls Clubs are located?
Because they're all located
Because
in
they're
neighborhoods,
they're
and those neighborhoods vary in their zoning classifications. Plus, the special exception gives us the protection, if you cannot meet the parking, if you're trying to open one in a house on the middle of a residential street, where you're going to impact the neighborhood, I mean, all those criteria are set forth in the special exception. And it's an up or down if you can meet it.
So to reemphasize that, yes, it's broad, but there is a built-in safety net there that means every case has to come forward and has to meet the lighting, the signage, the parking, the best use for the neighborhood. Every single one has to come forward for an approval. Okay. Any other questions or discussion before I call for a motion?
I'd just like to point out, excuse me, that in the one that we presented for community facilities, Uptown, CRD, and NC was permitted use under the table, club or lodge, nonprofit. That is not permitted, so is that going to become a special exception use there, or are we going to eliminate that altogether for those areas?
You're saying,
If I make a motion, I'll amend it to only include the special exception uses, add the special exception uses to Clever Lodge not-for-profit in the residential areas. When I make a motion, I'll do it that way.
All right, I would like to, if there's no more discussion, I'd like to call for a motion. Let's,
Do we have to have any discussion from?
but before I can call for a motion,
Well, I just want.
thank you for keeping me on track. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak? We already did all that. In terms of amending this, okay, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of the ordinance that we're discussing at this moment?
I just want to make a comment about this.
Could you get in front of the mic for us? Thank you.
When we came forward looking at how we would do the Edgewood School project, first of all, we got vetted pretty heavily by the school board before they would sell the school. They wanted to know who potential suitors were. So there was a rather lengthy, this has been going on for almost a year, more than a year. So that whole process with the school board being very persnickety about who's going to occupy that school. The next step is you go down and meet with Will and John and the whole crew. And they want to know exactly what you're doing before they will get on board. So y'all have a very thorough set of hurdles that someone has got to go through before they ever get to this point. So I don't think you're going to be seeing a lot of frivolous golf courses being recommended to go or gambling halls or something like that. I can just tell you, it's a gauntlet that you have to go through, and it's very expensive. You have to apply, and they ask a lot of tough questions. So I hope y'all will appreciate the kind of job they do. We don't just come up here because we paid our money, and they.
I think we're pretty well aware. Those of us that are sitting up here aren't
Yeah.
getting paid, period. So I think we're pretty well aware of what goes into this. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak against the text amendment as it's been amended verbally? Yes, ma'am. And if you'll please come to the mic and state your name and address.
Good morning. My name is Molly Smith. I live at 720 Broadway. This is the first I've heard of this. I didn't intend to come up this morning. But it's alarming to me. I think I heard the point that the proposal is to add a special exception use available to the community and in a district that doesn't involve the Boys and Girls Clubs. I live in the historic district, and I'm opposed to just having special exceptions available because it dilutes the value of the special exception process. I mean, I understand that everyone has to come before it, but there are limited special use exceptions available in a specific district for a reason. And certainly without cause right now, I would not support adding a special exception use to a district that's not in play and seemingly wouldn't have need to have such a facility in it. It's a residential area with historic homes and businesses that are being turned back into historic homes in many instances with few exceptions. So I would oppose this change as it relates to the historic district.
Thank you very much.
I just want to be clear on something real quick, just one quick question. So you would be opposed to a recreational department or facility in the historic district?
Well, I'll be honest, I'm not even sure I follow anymore because I heard the definition of community facility. I'm not sure I completely understand what the nonprofit community lodge or whatever the word is, and as it's totally defined now as amended. But I'm certainly, I think the statement Mr. Brandon made was that flexibility and breadth is the best thing for the community, and I don't agree in the context of the historic district.
Okay. All right, do I hear a motion, Mr. Brannon?
Are you ready for this? All right. In the case of REZN 12-18-2248, a request for a text amendment to amend the text of the Unified Development Ordinance in regards to Table 3.1.1, I move that we, for the table line regarding Clever Lodge not-for-profit, we add special exception, and just so we're clear, I'm going to read the list. A special exception use to HIST, RE10, RE5, RE1, RT, SFR1, SFR2, SFR3, SFR4, RMF1, RMF2. Additionally, I move that we amend the definition in 13.1.1 of club or lodge not-for-profit to include the word educational, and at the end, change the and to and/or.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? All of those in favor, please raise your right hand. All right, hang on, I gotta do a count. 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor. All of those opposed? Oh, great. So I get to, and I am going to vote in favor. So this will go forward as a recommendation for approval. All right, then we're going to move on to, we're jumping down again out of order a little bit. We're going to jump down to a special exception, EXCP-12-18-2246. This is a request for a special exception use at 3835 Forest Road. The current zoning is SFR2, single-family resident 2. The proposed use is community facility. Martin Flournoy is the applicant. The property is located in Council District 1, Barnes. Mr. Renfro, if you'll please read the staff report.
Yes, ma'am. Access is or will the type of street providing access to the use be adequate to serve the proposed special exception use? Forest Road is a minor arterial road. It will provide adequate free-flow movement. Traffic and pedestrian safety. Is or will access into and out of the property be adequate to provide for traffic and pedestrian safety? The anticipated volume of traffic and access by emergency vehicles. Access into and out of the property in question will provide for adequate traffic and pedestrian safety and emergency access. Adequacy of public facilities. Are or will public facilities such as school, water, or sewer utilities and police and fire protection be adequate to serve the special exception use? Services such as water, sewer, utilities, police, and fire protection are adequate. Protection from adverse effects. Excuse me. Are or will refuge, service, parking, and loading areas on the property be located or screened to protect other properties in the area from such adverse effects as noise, light, glare, or odor? The property is surrounded by SFR2, noise, light, flare, and odors should be limited due to the nature of the facility. Hours of operation. Will the hours and manner of the operation of the special exception use have no adverse effects on the property and the area? The hours of the operation for this will not have an adverse impact on the neighboring properties in the area. Compatibility. Will the height, size, or location of the building or other structures on the property be compatible with the height, size, character, or location buildings or other structures on neighborhood properties? The structure, height, size, and location should match the uses found in other SFR properties. That's Council District 1 Barnes. 75 property owners within 300 feet of the property have been notified by mail of the proposed special exception use. The planning department received 1 call and or emails regarding the special exception use, and that call was for approval, and there's no additional information.
Thank you. Any questions regarding the staff report? All right, we have the applicant who has come forward again, so if you'll give us a brief overview. And if you have anything else to add.
I'm sorry?
I don't know if you have anything else to add to the staff report.
Not really. This is all relevant to the Boys and Girls Club and what we needed to operate there. So
Okay,
anyway, yeah, if y'all been to the club, it's pretty,
gotcha.
and just informational, the nature of the club really has gone more towards after-school programs and teen centers where tutorial programs that are bringing the GPAs of these kids up, and that's been more and more of Rodney's focus. And I think that's what's gotten the school system really behind trying to convert some of these older schools. They're seeing the grade point average of the schools go up as a result of the tutorial program. So Rodney's doing a great job with that.
Any questions, commissioners, on the staff report? Mr. Brannon?
Whoever makes the motion will just have to say that it's a special exception use to allow for a club or lodge nonprofit.
That's right. So did you hear that? Anybody who's going to make the motion has to,
Well, it's just part of that.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or concerns among, Mr. Kenner?
Yeah, I just have a question of staff, just for clarification. The previous zoning, the 2248, was voted affirmatively by this body, but hasn't been approved by the council. Okay. Okay. Is there any, can we proceed with this without the prior approval of the council on 2248?
Yes, as long as the text amendment was approved, you can vote on this case. The text amendment will go to council on first reading, and when the text amendment is on second reading, then the special exception can come forward. Text amendment has to be taken care of first. If it's denied,
Then there's
special
no
exception
special
case goes
exception.
away.
Right. Good, but that's a good question, so thank you for the clarification. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to come forward to speak in favor of this particular special exception? And I do not see anyone. Is there anyone who would like to come forward to speak against this particular special exception? All right, there is no one coming forward. So do I have a motion amongst the commissioners? Mr. Brannon.
I'll do it. In the case of EXCP 12-18-2246, a request for a special exception use at 3835 Forest Road, current zoning is SFR2. The proposed use is Clover Lodge nonprofit. I move that we approve the special exception.
And do I have a second? Okay, Mr. Bollinger. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. And it is unanimous, so that special exception will move forward in the event everything else goes. We're going to move to approve that. All right, again, I'm going to take us out of order. We're going to go to the REZN-11-18-2155. This is a request, excuse me, for a text amendment to amend the text of the UDO, the Unified Development Ordinance, in regards to section 4.6.4A and 4.6.12F, and 3.1.1 is the tree ordinance. And before we read anything in the staff report, this is going to frustrate the applicant, I know, but we have a rule here at the commission that when we are given documentation the morning that we're sitting up here, we can't hear the case. And we were given documentation first thing this morning with these changes, no matter how minor they may be. Commissioners, you have a choice. You can either table this so that you have an opportunity to understand what's been given to you, and it comes back before the next commission, or you deny it, and then the planning goes on from that standpoint.
I move we table this. till next
And we
meeting.
don't need a staff report when we're doing this, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I have a motion to table this from Mr. Greenblatt, and I have a, Mr. Dudley, yes, sir.
I'll just comment, my understanding is these changes address the concerns that we raised in the last meeting when we discussed the issue, but I agree that we haven't had time to fully digest them, and so
Yeah.
I'd like to.
Well, and it does, in some point it might seem moot, but our meetings are every other month at best, and it isn't fair to think that all the commissioners are going to be able to recollect what was discussed prior, so we have to be given an opportunity, or you all have to be given an opportunity to review and then go forward. And across the board, we do this for everybody, so we are not allowed to receive documents the morning of our meeting. So I did have a motion to table from Mr. Greenblatt, and I have a second, Mr. King. All of those in favor of tabling this until our next meeting, please raise your right hand. And it is unanimous. So this will be tabled until our next meeting. And then commissioners, please make sure you hang on to this packet, take a look at it, and if you have any questions, contact the planning department. All right, so that's going to move us on to our last topic, which is one that we have been inundated with public comments on. So I'm going to go ahead and read this case. It's REZN-01-19-0007. This is a request for a text amendment to amend the text of the Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, in regards to Table 3.1.1, which is health and fitness facilities. Mr. Renfro, if you'll read the staff report for us.
Yes, ma'am.
please.
Request to amend the text amendment of the UDO in regards to Table 3.1.1, Health and Fitness Facilities, to read as follows: by permitting health and fitness facilities with a special exception in the following district. That district is the historic district.
Okay.
One last thing, we received 32 responses to this case.
I will also tell you that there were 4 more that came to me between 10 o'clock and midnight last night, which I chose not to forward to the
So-
commissioners, and a text message at 7 o'clock this
So
morning.
36 total, 7 were for opposition and 22 were for.
And of the 4 that I got, let me see what the text message was, I don't remember. Okay, so I have 4 emails and a text message. 2 were in opposition, 3 were in favor.
So that would bring us to 9 in opposition and 25 in approval. And then Will Johnson has some additional information that he'll cover.
Okay. All right, commissioners, do you have any questions just right off the bat regarding the staff report? Okay. So are we calling for Mr. Johnson? Okay, Mr. Johnson, if you'll come forward before we call for the applicant. He just, yeah, that's okay. Yeah. Mr. Johnson.
Kathleen, will you ask Mike to flip it?
Pardon?
Ask Mike to flip the,
Oh, Mike, can you flip the camera to Mr. Johnson to the podium? Oh, yeah, there you go, thank you.
all right, y'all bear with us. I asked for a PowerPoint, this is a PDF, so John's over here having to manually scroll. Let me tell you how we got to this point. This is a presentation done by John Hutchison regarding this issue. Next slide. This is a timeline of events of how this started. August 8th, 18th, building alterations permit was applied for by Wayne Gentry Builders. This is pretty much a warehouse space. It's very open. They did not specify what the use was for, so the Codes and Inspections Department treated it as what they call a white box, which is just a big old open space and whatever you're adding, so on and so forth. On August 29th, the plans were approved by the plans examiner. Next one. Here's a copy of the permit, and it says it's just installing bathrooms. Next. And this is showing you where it was installed in the rear. Go ahead. All right, per the building code, this falls under 304.1, Business Group B. Business Group B occupancy includes, among others, the use of building or structure or a portion thereof for office, professional, or service-type transactions, including storage of records and accounts. Business occupancies shall include but not be limited to the following: civic administration. Civic administration is pretty much what's going on next door in the other suite that is the River Valley Regional Commission. On September 5th through October 4th, all the work was going on. October 4th, certificate of completion on the building portion, the construction, is finalized. The lessee is told by the building inspector to come to inspections and codes and apply for a CO. And here's a copy of all of that dealing with the permit. Next one, John.
Excuse me, what exactly was in that? Because there's no way I could read that. What
It's
was
just
in-
showing you
what
where
was
they
the permit
finalized the construction
Of the
of
bathroom.
the bathrooms.
Okay.
Next one, next one. All right, so the week of October 8th, Ms. Joanne Kogel comes to Inspections and Code, counter to get her CO for her gym, but is denied because the zoning is inappropriate. Next one. This building is zoned historic. It is across the street from the Trade Center. It is a former dialysis clinic, and as you can see, it's surrounded by historic zoning. Next one. This use falls under the category of health and fitness facility. As you can see, it is not allowed in the HIST district. So on November 12th, I get a citizen complaint of the gym being in operation at 710 Front Avenue. Once we found out the building was owned by the River Valley and the Downtown Development Authority, we consider that a government entity, which we have always considered to be exempt from zoning, so they were allowed in there. No CO was granted because COs are not granted on government property. Well, this citizen sent me an email. I told her what our opinion was. She emailed back. I forwarded it to the city attorney. The city attorney sent back case law that says, please forward this to Judge Hagler.
That's the citizen.
That's the citizen who sent the email.
complaint.
And it says, he said, see Head Note 3. So Head Note 3 says, zoning and planning and their use of land, a state government and its agencies are immune from operation of local zoning regulations. So I did as I was instructed and sent it back to Judge Hagler. Judge Hagler responded that she would consult with a government
Attorney.
a familiar attorney and get back with us. She did. She came back with a very compelling counter that was actually accurate. At that time, we were informed by the city attorney that Judge Hagler was indeed correct and to proceed as if the zoning's in place. Go ahead, John.
Because, I just want to make sure we're clear on this, because just because it's a state-owned facility does not mean it has to.
Well, and I'm going to get to that too, because
Preclude
there's
zoning.
actually special criteria in the
Okay,
state code
I'm sorry.
that deals with
Okay.
regional commissions.
Gotcha, okay,
Excuse
go
me,
ahead.
but when you state that she was indeed correct, you need to explain what she was correct about.
She was
now.
correct. She was correct that the city attorney had misread the
Thank you.
case law that was given to me.
Correct.
And that I was asked to forward.
Right.
So despite everything that's gone out, I have not stuck hard with, I have an opinion here that some of the issues we deal with state and federal properties and local properties, Columbus State University, they're operating Chick-fil-A, Subways, things like that out of their thing, which is not a primary governmental use. Federal courthouse, you don't go telling a federal judge that if he needs renovations in his courthouse that he has to get a permit. That's just not how it happens. So they are exempt from permitting. Next one. Again, on November 12th, we got this information. On November 16th, after the back and forth with the emails, city attorney provided the response that Judge Hagler was indeed correct based on her interpretation of that case law. On December 3rd, Inspections and Codes sent a special enforcement officer out and advised staff to come into the annex and obtain compliance. So on December 11th, Mrs. Kogel gets on public agenda, addresses council. Council, if y'all have watched the tape, advises that we will go into executive session. In executive session, council instructs us to move forward with the text amendment instead of rezoning this property to CRD. So that is what we have done. Go to the next one. Go to the next one. Oh, are we back? Oh, I have an extra slide, sorry. As it relates to the River Valley, and there's still all this gray area about what government entities meet zoning and which ones don't. However, as it relates to the Regional Commission, and this is state law as it relates only to the Regional Commission, nothing in this article shall limit or compromise the right of the governing authority of any county or municipality to exercise the power of zoning. So anything they do has to meet zoning. Under our direction from council, we have brought forward the text amendment change.
All right. And thank you for that clarification. That's very helpful. So Where are we? Did you read the staff report? You did. Okay, all right. So, Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Johnson regarding clarification? The biggest thing was understanding that that regional commission does have to adhere to the zoning ordinances in our community. Mr. Dudley.
So just to make sure I understand, council has said that rezoning is off the table and that instead it supports an amendment, or that the only option it wants to consider is an amendment?
Professionally, I'd love to rezone this, the hotel,
Right.
the Heritage Towers, the Trade Center, all of it to CRD. However, that historic district line has been hard and fast at 9th Street pretty much ever since the historic district's inception. And that's a very touchy subject that I don't think anybody wants to cross. And this being south of 9th Street, it just, not favorable.
Doesn't mean it couldn't be attempted.
Didn't say it couldn't be attempted,
Correct.
absolutely. But our direction from council was the text amendment.
And to go back through the proper channels.
Right.
For which to do that. Mr. Greenblatt.
I guess I'm a little confused. Who is actually requesting this text amendment?
We were told we had just to have an application on file. We just asked Ms. Kogel to fill one out while we were meeting with her.
Okay. So the normal application process is not really what's been done here.
Well, we were tasked with it. We just asked her to have one on file.
Okay. Mr. Kenner.
Okay, if this text amendment is approved, then I guess the facility stays in operation and continues. If this text amendment is disapproved, what happens?
Ms. Kogel was given a 120-day temporary CO by City Council. If this text amendment is denied, it will go on to council. But
Ultimately, if it's denied, even at the council level, then
Yes.
she has to vacate the premises.
Yes, yes. If it's approved, she will come back next month with a special exception. We did not put them on the same agenda based on the nature of how this is all played out.
This is the first step of wherever it ends up. Commissioners, are there any other conversation or discussion that we need to have? Mr. Brannon?
Is there a way to, when doing a special exception or amending it this way, that you have a minimum space requirement? Or do we have a way to do that, to say that these facilities can only, if they're going to go into that district, they have to have a certain square footage?
Size or whatever.
Minimum size?
Well, based on, familiarity with the historic district, there's pretty much zero parking.
Yeah.
So that limits
Anybody.
what you can do. For instance, in 2014, restaurants as a special exception in the historic district were brought forward. This board approved that option. 7th Street Provisions, who is there now, they were not the applicant. When they came forward for the special exception, they were going to be denied because they did not have parking. However, within the UDO, you have to supply off-street parking within 500 feet of your business. They were able to secure parking, off-street parking, and so they were approved. If you do not have parking, or if you're going into and impacting, you rent a house on Broadway in the middle of single family and you want to open a gym, you're not going to get that. That's the beauty of the special exception. You don't have parking, you're disrupting the neighborhood.
Because that's a checklist item. It's not up for a option or something like that could come here. If you don't meet the parking, the 500 feet.
It never gets to us.
It doesn't make it out of the planning department.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can always give us your money and come forward here, but yeah.
Right.
Mr. Dudley?
Are there any other businesses that would be affected if the text amendment is denied? I'm thinking of the yoga studio that's been on 2nd Avenue for a couple of years, I think.
Yeah, that yoga studio is in the school that is owned by Sia Edamati, the old school, which he rents out suites. It was given a CO as an accessory use, which is technically in error 3 or 4 years ago, should have been listed as a health and fitness facility. So that is something that, as this process goes on, we will look at that as well.
So they might be affected, but we
They
can't
could
be
be
sure.
affected.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Johnson from the commissioners? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to come forward and speak in favor of this rezoning request? And if you'll, I've got a hand up right here. So if you'll come forward and state your name and address.
Good morning. My name is Fred Green, and I live at 745 Broadway. 2 other properties within the district. If there's, and I understand the fears and concerns of some of my friends and neighbors, but if there is ever a neighborhood that is appropriate for this type of use, it's ours. There are constantly people running, walking, working out all throughout our neighborhood and the adjoining community. I think with a properly vetted special exception use, it's certainly acceptable, and I support it.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? Mr. Smallman?
Ernie Smallman, 6 7th Street. I agree with what Mr. Green said. The special exception, the whole process allows exactly what we're going through now. You get pros, cons, everybody gets to lay out what their opinion, and we work through it. But our neighborhood is full of activity. And I've heard, comments that other neighborhoods don't have gyms. Well, Green Island has 2 gyms. They have a yoga studio, and they have a gym in the country club. So it's not out of the ordinary for this to take place in a neighborhood. And I think it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. And I want to reemphasize what I said in the very beginning about, I know that a lot of people want to be heard, but by the same token, I can't have everybody come forward. So if there is another person who has anything other than just you approve of it, if you've got something that we need to hear, that's fine. But I will just say, maybe for the sake of letting everyone sort of feel like they've been heard, if you are in favor of this and you are in the audience, if you would like to raise your hand and let us have some sort of a visual, raise your hand for me if you're in favor of it. Okay, so I don't know if I can get the camera to pan out to the audience. I don't know if he can hear me. But commissioners, that kind of gives you an idea. You see the hands that are up out there. So thank you for that. I am going to move now, and is there anyone else that has something that we haven't heard? I don't need to hear that you agree, but is there anything else that, in terms of approval, if there's something that we need to know about? Okay. This is something we haven't heard already? This does not have to do with disapproval. This has to do with approval. Okay, if you'll come forward and state your name and address.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Stacy Mode. I'm at 912 Sanford Road in Phoenix City. The gym is a half a mile from me, and I can walk into Phoenix City for that. I'm also an environmental scientist, and I do a lot of my work in Columbus, Georgia. And I have sent in a complete letter to the council that gives even more background that y'all can read at a different date. But I'm just proud of the direction Columbus has taken over the last several years to create a work, live, and play atmosphere within our new and existing communities. I do a lot of work in North Columbus where we're building new communities, do some in the west and east. This particular one is we are utilizing a vacant space with already parking, already the building itself, and if we're utilizing vacant space for progress and growth instead of impacting our natural resources, then that statement is, for me, is how Columbus is, the citizens of Columbus and the government of Columbus is striving to emulate to the surrounding area that this is what progress has preserved. So we're not going out and demolishing the trees or natural resources. And speaking of natural resources, most people in that gym come out and help me. I do a lot of volunteer work here in Columbus, they come out on an annual basis with me to clean up the historic district, to clean up the Riverwalk, the watershed. So it's not just about creating a stronger gym community. It's also about that gym community is coming out and creating a stronger community for everyone as a whole. So I do approve of this, and I just want to make sure everybody knew that. And some of the personal data that I have is in my letter that I sent out earlier. So,
Well, thank you. I wasn't expecting to hear an environmental take on that, so that's interesting. Thank you very much. So now I'm going to move to ask if there is anyone who is against this proposal, and if you would raise your hand for me if you want to come forward to speak, so I get an idea of what I'm dealing with. Okay. So if the lady in the back, I saw your hand go up first. If you'll come forward and state your name and address and give us an overview of your opposition.
Good morning. My name is Fran Poole Carpenter. I live at 738 Broadway. I also recently purchased a piece of property on a home on 6th Street that is in very poor condition after having been a rental property for many years, and my plan is to renovate that property and improve it. I guess I sort of have some questions as well as a statement. Do I understand that if this special exception is approved, that if the UDO is changed, that the special exception would require parking when it comes forward for approval? Is that correct?
Yes, it'll be required to have on-site parking.
On-site parking.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
there a number of parking places that would be required?
It would be dictated by the size of the property.
Okay. Because my concern is not about this particular location. This particular location does have parking. It is a commercial building already, and I'm not that concerned about this going there. If there were some other way to do it, I would feel like that was a better solution. But I'm concerned about facilities like this popping up throughout the neighborhood. There are already 4 or 5 workout facilities in the central business district, 2 blocks from where we live. You know, we heard the gentleman earlier say that one of the things we're trying to do with these neighborhoods is to have residential areas adjacent to businesses that people can walk to. And that's what we do in our neighborhood. That's why we moved there, so that we could live in a residential area but have easy walkable access to these kind of wonderful amenities that we have in the Uptown Business District. But there's an apartment building located right next door to my home. We've made a sizable investment to live in that home. That apartment building is not well taken care of. It's getting old. There's nothing historic about it. What would keep this building if somebody came and bought it and decided to tear it down and build a facility there? There's a parking lot. Would there be anything that would keep them from being able to build a health and fitness facility next door to my house? That's a concern to me. And there are other neighbors who have invested a lot of money in restoring their homes who have the same concerns about making this a wholesale decision for our entire historic district. And I would like for you to please take that into consideration when you make your decision today.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone, go ahead, Mr. Brandon, no, go ahead.
Can I ask a question to staff? If any, because of that, I mean, that is a very good point about someone buying another facility. Obviously, the special exception rules would apply, but in this district, BHAR would also have architectural review on anything that goes in, especially in a tear down and rebuild, correct?
And I promise you, Historic Columbus would throw a wine and cheese party watching the demolition.
But for a new facility
But for a
going
new
in,
facility, they would
still
have to have BHAR approval, and putting another commercial building right there at that corner would be highly unlikely. That is part of the reason there's not a hotel sitting on the Marriott parking lot right now, is BHAR.
Because of the requirements of
Because of the
BHAR.
requirements.
Okay.
And let's explain for the public, those on television, what BHR is.
Yeah, it's
please.
Board of Historic and Architectural Review.
I just want to make sure that we're
Sorry,
clear on
thank
that. Those of us, some folks may not know that. Is there, so The woman who came forward spoke in opposition, so I'm going to ask the same question that I asked earlier. For those of you who are in the audience that are opposed to this ordinance, if you would raise your hand so that we can see who's here amongst us who is opposed to it. So a large number, okay? Mr. Renfro's counting, keep your hands up. Oh, did you get? Okay. Huh? Mm-hmm. He counted last time, yeah. So I do want to ask this, just of the audience, how many do we have in favor? 11 are in favor, and how many are opposed?
13.
13, okay. All right, and is there anyone in opposition who has any information outside of just agreeing with the opposition? Is there any other information that we need to hear? Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
in reviewing what has been cast on this case, I need to just express my concerns on, I guess, how the information has been disseminated, the issues that came about with staff, and I do understand that understanding the legal ramifications, that there are details that slip through the cracks and we need to get it straight. But how this has been handled in the email chains that have been going on, I am not sure that that is the way this committee is supposed to be communicated with. And it does concern me that we get the detailed information from all these individuals. I believe that should go through staff. And I understand the concerns and I understand the way this came about, but it's extremely concerning to me how this actually did come about.
I can't disagree. We've all had some concerns with how that's come about and how it's been communicated. Anything else, commissioners, that you care to discuss or bring to the table?
I just have one question of clarity.
Sure.
For John, just to be sure, I'm correct on this with the way the PowerPoint/PDF was presented. The individual running the gym was under the impression that they had all the necessary permissions needed by the city to move forward, right?
They did, yes, sir.
And that individual made some financial investments in this facility under the permission that had been previously been given by the city. Is that correct?
Right, correct.
If this is ultimately denied by city council, what's the recourse for those, for that facility owner who has relied upon the professional opinion of the staff to move forward with their development?
Before you answer that, I know where you're going with this, and that's fine, but I also want to say that it's unfortunate if a citizen is given the wrong information from staff, but any business owner in this city that makes an application or signs a lease to go into a business, it is that business owner's responsibility 100% to know what they are signing a lease for and that they are in compliance for it. You cannot rely on your realtor, you can't rely on your neighbor, and in this case, you weren't able to rely on the city. It is the business owner's responsibility to know that they are signing a lease and opening a business in something that they are zoned for. Go ahead.
I don't, what was, her other option would be to rezone, try to rezone it to a CRD. And then what other recourses you have in the legal world.
I do have a question, though, about this, because there's been questions about the actual request for the text amendment. Are we saying now that the planning department is making this request?
This request was to us from council, not to Ms. Kogel, to us.
So what I'm saying is for purposes of, I mean, you had the paper application on file, but in reality, this is a request of council / the planning department.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that we're clear,
Yes.
that we're able to hear, because there's questions about the completeness of the underlying application and all this, that, and the other. But if it's a request of
the city,
whether planning or commission or council, that kind of, we're able to hear this because it's the city presenting it. to us. That's what I wanted to make sure.
Good clarification. Thank you.
One more question of
Yes,
clarity.
Mr. Reese.
With that said, is it your impression, sir, that city council is in favor of changing the,
I
this
can't say
amendment?
that.
Okay.
They, it's just like, and some of y'all are in private business. Nobody wants to see anybody go out of business, so they're giving them the option of trying to rectify the situation. See, we're just handling the text amendment. We're out after that.
Well, I guess
Everything else will stand on its own merit as far as a special exception if that's approved through the
Right.
text amendment.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm getting to is ultimately what we decide today, whether it's in favor of it or not, city council has the final decision.
Correct.
So if they decide to bring this forward, clearly someone just wanted to put it in motion to go through all the proper legal steps so that when it gets to them, they can make a decision.
Well,
So if they know where they want to go with this, just let us know because ultimately they can override whatever we say anyway.
You are an
Yeah,
independent
that's-
recommendation, and just because council asked us to move this forward and try to help rectify this situation does not mean that there are 6 votes of council in front of it. I mean, in favor of it.
Well understood, sir. Thank you.
Which brings me to ask one more time if there's any other discussion or conversation amongst the commissioners. And if there is not, then what I'm asking for is a motion for the approval. Pardon? Well, as I said earlier, I mean, if you've got something to say that we haven't heard, that's fine. But if you're just coming forward to say you don't agree with it, I'm going to say no. Right, and that is what was spoken from the resident that came forward, is to not set a bad precedent for the neighborhood. So commissioners, does anyone want to make a motion? Mr. Brand?
In the case of REZN 01-19-007, a request for a text amendment to amend the text of the Unified Development Ordinance in regards to Table 3.1.1 to add a special exception for health and fitness facility in HIST, I move that we approve that text amendment.
All right, let me make a note real quick. So I have, so a motion has been made, and I have a second. All of those in favor?
I think we need a correction. It's not just the historic district. Is that correct?
Sir, it is just the historic district.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve, and I have a second. All of those in favor of approving this, please raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3. So I have 3. All of those opposed, please raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have 4 that are opposed. So this will actually go forward with a recommendation.
You put on the record that I abstain from voting, Madam Chair.
That you're abstaining?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So hang on a minute. So I had 3 that approved. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. So you're going to take your vote off? Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I was just, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so let me, for my, if you're in favor, raise your right hand. I got to make a count. 1, 2, 3 in favor, okay. Opposed? 1, 2, 3 opposed, and 4 opposed, and 1 abstained. Okay, got it. So we are moving forward.
Motion to deny.
Right, I understand that. We're moving forward with a motion to deny it.
You have to.
So I need to have a motion for denial. Do I hear a motion for denial?
I make a motion that we deny.
Mr. Greenblatt, second? All right. All those in favor? No, I don't need to do it in favor. We just make the motion to deny, to move forward to deny, correct? Yes. But we just have to make a motion to, do we have to make a motion to move it to denial? Yeah, we do.
To be covered, I would go ahead and vote.
All right, those in favor for denial, raise your right hand. So I have 4 for denial. And
Yes.
you don't vote on a motion to deny. We've never have done that before. So all those in favor of denial, raise your right hand. All right, all those who are not in favor of the denial. All right, so it is moving forward as a denial, request for denial. Well, that was nice and confusing. All right, that's all of our cases. We do have new business, which is an election of the new officers for the chairperson and the vice chair, because I am rolling off the end of March, and your vice chair, Ed Kenner, is rolling off. Mr. Greenblatt?
Madam Chair, I have a recommendation for replacement of officers. I would like to recommend or nominate Mr. King as chair and Mr. Bollinger as vice chair.
So we have on the table Ralph King to be elected as chair and Bobby Bollinger as vice chair. Do I have a second in that? I do have a second. All those in favor of electing Ralph King as chair and Bobby Bollinger as vice chair, please raise your right hand. And all those opposed? Are you voting, or what are you, not voting? Okay.
Before we adjourn, I want to say something.
So we're going to move forward to elect Ralph King as chair and Bobby Bollinger as vice chair. Hang on one second. We don't have any old business. Mr. Kenner, you,
I would like to give you a hearty thanks for the hard work you've done as chairwoman of this commission. Today has been particularly arduous, and there's been some challenging days in the past, and you did a great job.
well, thank you. I appreciate that.